Hello, everyone. In this video, we are going to explore animated data visualization. Here is the outline for this module. We will look at schematic of data visualization, and we will talk about 3 definitions of animation, and then followed by a brief history of animations in data visualization. And then we will talk about the bar chart rays, which is a very well-known kind of animated data visualization. And then the next topic is the ingredients of animated visualization and 5 types of animated visualizations. So here is the schematic of data visualization based on these 2 types of visualization we talked about before: explanatory versus exploratory. Explanatory visualization brings the main result to the forefront. To some extent, they help to reveal the story. So we mentioned this before. So you need to first raise a question, then try to use visualization to answer the question. So for your individual project, mostly you are going to work on this type of visualization. So try to identify a question, and then use data visualization to explore the question, and then reveal the solution or the answer to your audience. And then for your final project, you can extend it to the exploratory kind of a setting. Try to add more features and try to make it more interactive. Okay, so that's the second type of visualization, exploratory visualization. They help users interact with a data set or subject matter to uncover the findings themselves. We can also look at these 2 types in terms of static versus interactive. So static visualization, they normally appear to be static because based on the name. So they're not moving. They try to provide all the information at once. They're not active. Interactive visualization, they're going to allow the information to be transferred between the figure and the user. So they give a broad look at the graphic space, then they are going to allow the audience to further define the space of interest, and then permit the audience to capture specific details. So here is the 4 quadrants based on these 2 dimensions: explanatory versus exploratory, static versus interactive. So for the first quadrant, static and explanatory, so this type of data visualization tends to be static and are used to reinforce a point made in accompanying text, such as standard charts, bars, lines, columns. So normally infographics, they often use this type of data visualization. Second type, static and exploratory. So they're going to lead readers discover their own stories as they examine the static representation of data. So here we have several examples. You can click the link. The first one is an infographic. Let me go back to the slide. So here is the first example. It's more like an infographics, which we will talk about in the following modules. And the second example is this Moritz Stephanus loosely ingredient network. It's static, but it's exploratory. Static, but exploratory. So even though it's not moving, but it's still exploratory, which means that the audience can use the data visualization to discover their own story. So this is the the example for the second type of data visualization based on this scheme. The third type is interactive and explanatory. So it's explanatory means it's gonna answer or address a question, and it's also interactive. So here is an example from the World Bank. It's the economy in the growth example from the World Bank. So you can see the focus is on economy and the growth. So that's in the explanatory nature, and it's interactive. You can actually choose particular parameters to customize this interactive visualization. And this last one is interactive and exploratory. This is the most kind of interactive and types of data visualization with most of the tools and the features that allow the audience to find out the stories based on their own preferences. So this is from OECD Better Life Index. You can see it has lots of tools that you can use to personalize this data visualization to discover your own story. So this is the basic way to categorize data visualization based on these two dimensions: static versus interactive, exploratory versus explanatory. So based on this, the vertical dimension, static to interactive, so we can actually identify these 5 types of animated visualizations. So which we will talk about in the following slides: soft transition, social and GIFs, stories, sound, and small multiples. So in the transition from static to interactive types of data visualization, the animation can be used to increase the interactive nature of data visualization. So Munzner has 3 definitions of animation in data visualization. The first one is narrative storytelling, which is basically movies. The second one is the transition from one state to another. The last one is the video playback. So Munzner writes about how one of the big advantages of animation is that it helps us maintain context. So in other words, you can see the bubbles slide from one position to another, or how the bar expands and shrinks from one year to the next. So in a static case, you would have to curtail the amount of data you show or imagine that change, which almost is impossible. So essentially, the idea is animation actually helps the user to maintain the context of data visualization you want to present to the audience. So here is a brief history of animation in data visualization. So only a few years ago, we were mostly making static graphs. And then the tools got better. For instance, we got Tableau, we got D3 and many other kind of user-friendly tools to help us to easily develop animations in visualization. And also the browsers got faster. The computers got better and people spend more times on their smartphones. So we moved more and more to interactive visualizations nowadays. And everything became interactive. You could click on every line, bar, and the dots, and some tooltip or roll over on a particular element, and a pop-up is going to show up to give you more details. So creating interactive visualization is a relative expensive kind of effort. So there now seems to be a turn away from interactivity and back to static graphs. So it takes actually pretty amount of effort for the designer to make it interactive. So that's why there's a trend actually to turn back to simple design. And obviously, this isn't to say that people, they don't want to see interactive visualization, but it's just to say that interactive visualization are probably used more strategically in a better way to actually to maybe to present the best information you want to convey to the audience. So again, as a result, what we are seeing now is a move towards animated visualization, which is kind of in between the two forms. There are a few reasons for this, and they can be relatively easy to make. They work on different platforms, and they can help engage people in ways that other forms cannot. So these are the kind of advantages of animated data visualizations. So they can be relatively easy to make. They work on different platforms. They can help engage people in ways that other forms cannot. So in the context of marketing advertising, if you think about the ways to engage audience, so we have moved away from those kinds of static advertisements. And to this early video, and used by McDonald's, let's look at the 1967 McDonald's commercial.
I'm going to show you how McDonald's builds a Big Mac sandwich. It starts here with a lightly toasted bun, and then a pure beef hamburger, sizzling hot, applied with cheddar blend cheese, and some crisp fresh lettuce. Then, our own secret sauce, the club slice, toasted. Another hamburger, and a little more sauce just for good flavor. Crisp dill pickles, and the sesame seed crown. This is the sandwich. McDonald's new Big Mac sandwich for the bigger than average appetite.
Okay, so this is one of the early videos of McDonald's. So it's worth noting that even making this kind of movies were not particularly easy to do, and but we can compare the video with what we can see nowadays. So look where we are at now with the commercials from McDonald's. The super close-ups, big juicy hamburgers and really red tomatoes. It's not about the content, but about engaging people through the images. So here is a very well-known example. So if you haven't seen this before, the bar chart race from JBM, so which is the person's abbreviation, and John Murdoch. So he shows a great way to use bar charts actually in the animation, in an animated way. So let's look at this example. Wait a minute. Yeah, it started from year 1500. So it shows the changes in the population of major cities around the world from the year 1500 through 2018. So the length of the bar shows the population, and the position shows their ranks. So we can notice how the whole thing starts with a fairly long pause. The 1500 and map title both expand, and then the animation starts. So Istanbul from Turkey was the largest, was a city with the most population in early 1700s. Then Beijing, China became the top in 1700. And then London started to catch up. So New York started to overtake London. Started so in around 1930 became the city with the most population. Then Tokyo. In Mexico City. Okay, so we can see this is pretty interesting. So lots of data is packed into this bar chart. It's because of the animated nature. So if you take a look at this kind of line chart, so it still actually describes the same kind of a changing pattern of all of these cities. But apparently this is not engaging, not engaging enough like in the previous animated bar chart, even though the same type of information is presented in this data visualization. So if ranks are your primary interest, then we can probably make a bar chart like this one. But again, we actually cannot get the same type of interest or engagement as the animated bar chart. So we could, of course, also simply focus attention on some subset of the data, but again, this doesn't have the same clarity or engagement as the animated bar chart. So let's talk a little bit about why it's this bar chart race or animated bar chart is so kind of engaging. So the author, which is JBM, John Byrne-Murdoch, so he actually reviews the ingredients in the bar chart race. So these are the primary ingredients when the values are changing hugely over time in your data set. And when there's a changing cast of characters, when audience can get on board quite naturally. So first, the value needs to change hugely over time. So in this example, the population continues to expand over time. And there are various points in history when things really accelerate. Second, so we will need a changing cast of characters. So in his visualization, so he only shows the top 10 cities. So if he shows all the cities in the data set, then the graph would be really tall and we won't be able to see anything. So by focusing on just the most populated cities, so the cities change quite dramatically and we can focus on those top 10 in the whole list of the data set. Third, the audience can get on board with his visualization quite naturally. So it's just a bar chart which everybody knows and can quickly understand. And the ranks are easy to figure out. And there's also a secondary way in which this is quite natural because we are all related to the cities we see. So we may come from different countries, from different backgrounds. So we can focus on specific city in those countries. And we can identify those cities and countries and easily to understand why they appear when they do. So people from different regions, from different nations, they will have a similar experience when they watch this animated bar chart changing from time to time. So what's also interesting is people's reaction to the bar chart race. So here are some tweets. The one in particular makes an interesting point is the evolving pilot plots. So which are interesting and we are inclined to actually watch the entire thing. So normally you are not going to stop and abandon it in the middle of the animation. So it's not just the content. So content really matters, of course. If the data were totally made up or I had no basic understanding, I wouldn't want to interact with visualization at all. So the other point JBM John Byrne-Murdoch makes is that by sitting and watching the animation, it gives you time to immerse yourself in the subject matter. Again, the content matters because you have to be at least somewhat engaged with the topic, but the act of animating the data forces us to take time with it. So this kind of animated feature actually created this kind of context or environment for us to immerse ourselves in the subject matter. Three ingredients for animated data visualization is, in general, developed from John Byrne-Murdoch's bar chart race. So these are used for kind of elements for us to think about how to utilize those particular components to develop an effective data visualization with animation to capture and engage the audience, capture the audience attention and engage the audience. So these are the three ingredients. So right pacing, right text, and the right platform. So based on the bar chart arrays, we can see that these are the important kind of principles that can be used to control the animated data visualization. So first, the pacing needs to be right. If it's too fast, and then we won't be able to get it. If it's too, people are going to lose the patience to finish watching it. So remember how the year 1500 glowed at the beginning of the bar chart race. So this helps us root our basic understanding of the visualization before the animation kicks in. So second, we need to have the right text. So we may need to explain how to read the graph or point out specific aspects of the graph. And the last one, we need to use right platform. So some of this will work well on Twitter or Facebook, but they may not work well in the blog post. So we need to consider the expertise and the needs of our audience from a content perspective. But we also need to understand what kind of platforms our audience are using or they prefer to use. So let's record the pre-attentive processing that we mentioned before. So Gestalt principles emphasize that perceptual rules to help guide our design process so that our viewer focuses where we want them to focus. So you can see some of these Gestalt principles at play here. Proximity and similarity in color and the size, they help us understand and organize the circles in this bubble chart. And the common regions helps us organize the scatter plot. And common threads can be used to help us organize the movement. So consider a flock of birds. When you see them flying in the sky, you view the birds as a group. If a few birds were flying the other way, you would view them as a different group. So for animation, so being careful about how things move together is really important for people's perception of the visual. So we are going to talk about the remaining 5 types of animations in a separate video. If you have questions, feel free to let me know.